The year is 1980, a time in the midst of a cultural explosion. Technology, albeit ancient for today's standards, is making the world smaller. Music from around the globe can be heard with just a click of a button. People can communicate with others around the world via phone. Satellite television is now a thing, enabling users to view events outside of their current country or continent. Instant communication is a huge deal, but in many cases, it is much more enjoyable to actually be in a location. The answer to this was air travel. Before, and up until the 1950s, people would undergo a multi-day long voyage to go from North America to Europe, or the other way around. Transatlantic air travel had begun in the 1920s, but it wasn't until the 50s that the demand for air travel surpassed the demand for ocean liners. Without the demand for transatlantic passenger routes, shipping companies had to change their approach. What if instead of going back and forth between two ports, they had round-trip sailings? Passengers would pay to get on and be transported to a number of different port stops before being dropped off where they started. Ocean liners were modified, some renovations so extensive they added an entire deck. Companies were also starting to order purpose-built cruise ships, vessels focused on leisure over speed. The transition from one-way relocation to round-trip vacations escalated into a technological race between cruise lines for the best hardware. There were many cruise lines in existence by the 1980s, so in order to stand out, you would have to be extraordinary. You would need to set yourself apart, and there is no better way to do that than to build bigger and better. From this ambition arose the giants on the seas today, and it all began with Sovereign of the Seas. This is part 1 of a series about the race to build the largest cruise ship. All companies in any industry try to be the biggest in sales or users, but what makes cruising unique is that they have a tangible item that can be the biggest, the ship itself. Every brand, no matter what niche, wants to be the best and build the biggest. But as we will learn, bigger is not always better. From the 1940s to the 1980s, the largest passenger ship size did not increase, while maritime engineering improved quietly. The potential was out there, but the limit was unknown because no one had been keeping up with it. Multiple cruise lines tried: Royal Caribbean, Princess, Carnival, Cunard, and Norwegian, all of which are still big today, but only one can have the world's largest passenger ship. The attempts to build the largest cruise ship supersede cruising. It is a story of engineering, business, marketing, and innovation. Even if you are not a fan of cruising, I hope you can respect the effort and knowledge required to build these giants. It was a tough decision choosing where to begin this series. You could go back to the original ocean liners of the early 20th century, or start in more modern times with ships over 200,000 gross tons. I decided to begin with 1988's Sovereign of the Seas, because many call it the first Megaship, and also, it was the first purpose-built cruise ship to be the world's largest sailing passenger ship. Now, onto the video. Before introducing Sovereign of the Seas, we need to take a look at Royal Caribbean's competition. According to Royal Caribbean blog, in 1984, Royal Caribbean had 11% of the cruise market share, behind Norwegian Cruise Line with 14% and Carnival Cruise Line at 15%. Carnival was a decently sized cruise line. By 1984, they had a fleet of 3 converted ocean liners and a purpose-built ship, Tropical. Norwegian Cruise Line was not far behind. NCL had 5 ships. Among them was SS Norway, a repurposed ocean liner. SS Norway was a unique ship with a very unique story. Originally named SS France, the ocean liner had its maiden voyage in 1962 for French Line. At the time of its debut, it was the largest sailing passenger ship. The story of this vessel could be its own multi-part video series, but to keep this concise, Here is an abridged version of how SS France changed hands. Due to the high cost of oil, the French government had to be picky with its spending. They determined they had to pull financial support for SS France and French Line and diverted that money to fund the Concorde passenger jet project. In response, the crew staged a strike, but eventually the SS France was decommissioned, yet not scrapped. Norwegian Cruise Line ends up buying the ship, does an extensive refit which results in an extra passenger deck, and renames it SS Norway. The refit increased the gross tonnage by over 5%, putting it at over 70,000 gross tons, and keeps the newly named SS Norway at the top of the size charts. Royal Caribbean sees Carnival and Norwegian fielding a successful fleet of ships. They want to establish themselves as a cruise giant and set themselves apart from the competition. Royal decides that building the world's largest cruise ship was a project that they could undertake. But that begs the question, why build big? If the first thought that entered your head when asked why build big was because it's cool, you're not alone. By having the largest cruise ship in service, you essentially get free marketing until someone builds a bigger ship. No need to make a fancy tagline, you can merely say your ship is the biggest and people will show up. And that is on top of the media already talking about it. Secondly, building big serves a financial advantage. Every cruise ship has its own balance between stateroom count and onboard entertainment. The more spaces on the ship reserved for leisure, the less crowded it feels. Conversely, a large stateroom count and high passenger capacity can make the ship feel more crowded. Either way, the cruise line wins. If there's a high number of places on board to spend money, like the casino, photo gallery, bars, and such, then the cruise line takes in more revenue. With a large amount of staterooms, cruise lines can fit more people, therefore taking in their deposit for the room and whatever those extra passengers spend on board. Building big is not just awesome, it is highly profitable. Royal Caribbean had already built a few cruise ships of their own. At the time, they had 4 ships in service, including Song of Norway, which is among the first vessels purpose-built as a cruise ship. When the idea for a ship larger than Norwegian Cruise Line's SS Norway was proposed, Royal Caribbean's management was not completely sold. Royal Caribbean's largest ship at the time was Song of America, which was slightly larger than half the size of SS Norway. To build and operate a ship over double the size of what they were familiar with was absurd. But Royal Caribbean was no stranger to innovation. Due to the cruising boom at the end of the 70s, the line's first ship, Song of Norway, was lengthened to provide more capacity. The ship was cut in half, and a 26-meter-long section was inserted, making the ship about 85 feet longer. After undergoing the biggest maritime renovation that could possibly be done to a ship, Royal Caribbean was ready. This new ship would be groundbreaking. The grandest feature had to be the centrum. The centrum would be an industry-first multi-deck atrium inside of the ship. Lining the atrium would be glass elevators, enabling passengers to view the centrum from above as they went up or down. On the more mechanical side, the ship would have some unique innovations, later shown in a short documentary about the ship.
For the first time, a passenger ship's giant engines would be mounted on shock-absorbing pads, creating a virtually vibration-free ride for her passengers' comfort. She'd contain enough cable to stretch from Miami to Washington, D.C. She'd have 43 miles of pipes, 4 miles of corridors, and enough power to supply the electrical needs for a city of 10,000 people.
In order to power a ship of these proportions, she would be equipped with 4 engines, creating a combined 21,844 kilowatts of energy. There would be 2 propellers and 2 bow thrusters. At max capacity, she could hold 2,673 people, much more than any ship in their fleet. Her final size would be 73,192 gross tons. The plan was set. Now, it is time to make this vision a reality. All Royal Caribbean ships up until this point had been assembled by Finnish shipbuilder Wärtsilä, but Royal went with another shipyard to carry out the construction of this vessel. They chose the shipyard in Saint Nazaire, France to construct their future megaship. The contract was signed in July 1985, and steel cutting began a few weeks later. The blueprints are shared with the shipbuilder, but there is still an important detail left. What do you even name a ship that, on release, will be the most talked about vessel in the world? By ordering the ship, it had in a way been assigned the name. It would be referred to as A29, its yard number that had been assigned. This won't stay long, but it gives us something to call this new ship. We have talked about naming conventions before on the channel, but Royal didn't have set rules when naming a ship. There was no prefix, no suffix, just 2 or 3 words. Let's take a look at Royal Caribbean's first class of ships. The Song of Norway class featured 3: Song of Norway, Nordic Prince, and Sun Viking. All somewhat Scandinavian-themed names, but not a set convention just yet. Royal's fourth, and most recently released ship was Song of America, lead vessel of her class. Now we have somewhat of a pattern. The lead ship of each class is named Song of, and then a location. The new ship, A29, would debut in Miami. Maybe Song of Miami? Song of Florida? Whatever the name was, it would likely be the name of the ship class as well, so it had to be good. Moritz Skagen, one of the co-owners of Royal Caribbean, is credited with giving A29 her name. According to a report from Royal Caribbean blog, Skagen convinced the then CEO of Royal Caribbean, Richard Fain, that the name for their megaship should be Sovereign of the Seas. According to Fain, Moritz Skagen, quote, literally shook the name into me. Sovereign of the Seas would not be the first ship with that name, or even the second. In the 1630s, the British constructed a warship with the same name, later renamed to just Sovereign. In the 1850s, another Sovereign of the Seas debuted, this time a clipper ship. In their respective eras, both were very grand vessels. Royal Caribbean's Sovereign of the Seas had very high expectations to live up to. Assembly of the sections of the ship's keel began on June 10, 1986. It was then that the name Sovereign of the Seas was revealed to the public. By April of the following year, the ship was floated out for the first time. Construction on Sovereign was completed December 18, 1987. On January 15th of 1988, Sovereign of the Seas underwent her naming ceremony and was christened with a 77-pound champagne bottle. The next day, on January 16th, Sovereign of the Seas embarked on her maiden voyage. Royal Caribbean's big gamble paid off.
Sovereign of the Seas began her reign, setting a standard every new ship would strive to match.
Sovereign of the Seas was a very modern cruise ship when it came out. It was believed to be the best in the world. Nevertheless, it had its flaws. For the time, they weren't too much of a deterrent, but for today's standards, there would be one major issue if it was built this year. The ship was built with a total of 0 balcony staterooms. To passengers in the late 80s, this wasn't much of a problem. The SS Norway didn't have balconies at this time, and the feature wasn't mainstream yet. And with all of Sovereign's modern features, she had a while before she would become outdated. In the following years, the success of Sovereign of the Seas encouraged Royal Caribbean to expand. In late 1988, they ordered 2 more Sovereign-class ships. Sovereign of the Seas started the tradition of Royal Caribbean ships having the of the seas suffix, which they still use to this day. The second Sovereign-class ship debuted in late 1991 as Monarch of the Seas, and the third, Majesty of the Seas, debuted in 1992. That same year, Royal Caribbean placed an order for a new, similarly sized cruise ship that became known as the Vision class. The Vision class ships were similar to the Sovereign class, but had more glass so passengers could view the water, and were more technologically advanced. These ships built upon what the Sovereign class had done years before. In November 2004, Sovereign of the Seas was sent into dry dock after over 16 years of service for Royal Caribbean. Surpassed in size by multiple ships, she began to become outdated in her amenities. The Travel Channel did a docu-series on it titled Dry Dock, a cruise ship reborn. This dry dock was a massive renovation. The documentary showed how there were many venues that had to be renovated, and changes to staterooms. Because of this, Sovereign of the Seas received her first balcony cabins.
Most cruise ships are built with 60% balconies, and this one has 0. We don't have a lot of balconies, but at least we have something.
In total, they planned for 62 of the suite cabins to be equipped with balconies. The renovations also addressed a few other items. A new extension for the Windjammer buffet was inserted at the front, the lighting was redone on the Crown and Anchor logo, and much more. Sovereign of the Seas was successful in the Caribbean, but she had begun to become dated. In 2008, she was much smaller than the ships Royal Caribbean had in their fleet, and years older. Executives determined it would be best to transfer Sovereign of the Seas to Royal Caribbean's subsidiary, Pullmanturra Cruises. Now named Sovereign, she began service for them in early 2009. Sister ship Monarch of the Seas was transferred to Pullmanturra in 2013 under the name Monarch. Even with the two ships being transferred, the last ship in the class, Majesty of the Seas, stayed in Royal Caribbean's possession in the following years. There were plans to transfer her, but they never went through. This business model made sense. It kept Royal Caribbean, a family-oriented cruise line, with updated ships and modern amenities, while Pullmanturra could receive Royal's older ships and have them serve a different audience. This worked until 2020. The cruising industry was hit hard by COVID-19. When your business model is centered around having thousands of people close together, the risk of disease is high. Globally, cruising stopped, meaning cruise lines were not taking in money. Pullmanturra could not financially survive this, and what resulted was ships of their fleet being scrapped. Among these were Monarch and Sovereign. On the 22nd and 23rd of July in 2020, Monarch and Sovereign arrived in Aliaga, Turkey, for demolition. By February 2021, once the world's mightiest ship, Sovereign was completely scrapped. After 32 years in service, Sovereign made a lasting impression in the travel industry. It was the first time a purpose-built cruise ship was larger than the biggest sailing ocean liner. Sovereign's biggest impact is how she changed the cruise industry. She was proof that building big was financially and architecturally feasible. Sovereign made Royal Caribbean the giant they are today. With her and her sister ships, they established cruising dominance. In regards to all cruise lines, Sovereign of the Seas kicked off a race to build bigger and better that is still going on today, and that is what I want to examine within this series. In the coming episodes, we will look at Carnival's attempts at surpassing Royal, the Voyager class, the attempted return to ocean liners, megaships that never came to be, the rise and development of the Oasis class, and finally, where we are today. Up next, SS Norway gets one more shot at glory, Princess Cruises gets creative, and Carnival attempts to get past 100,000 gross tons. We will also look at how, due to a technicality, Sovereign of the Seas was not the largest passenger ship to set sail, even when she came out. Thank you for watching. This was Embarkation Day, and I wish you smooth sailing.